This is Join Us in France, episode 304. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and today I bring you a conversation with Carlson about the medieval hilltop village of Sancerre in the Loire Valley, about 2 hours south of Paris. The closest city to Sancerre is Bourges. We've talked about Sancerre before on the podcast, mostly when talking about wine, because they make a lovely white wine in Sancerre, but also about the French language school that's been there for many years. I will list related episodes in the show notes. Carl and his wife usually spend 3 weeks each year in Sancerre, and they've been doing so for years, so they know the area quite well. We talk about why they keep going back to this place, and I think this episode is going to be of interest to people who are interested in wine, of course, the Loire Valley, obviously, but also about moving to France because they've gotten to know the area really well. Thank you, patrons, for giving me a precious gift, the time to produce this podcast. Your monthly gift makes it all possible, and in these times of I don't even know how to call it now. It's like depressing. I can't tell you how much it means to me. There will be a shout out to new patrons and more info on how to join all my wonderful patrons after the interview. Check out my audio self-guided tours on joinusinfrance.com/audio tours. As I record this, I have 4 of them for Paris, and I will release more as time goes by because I love the freedom and depth that these tours provide. Show notes for this episode are on joinusinfrance.com/304, the number 304, where you can see a recap of what we've discussed and relevant links. And of course, follow Addicted to France on Instagram to see photos of Sancerre and surroundings that Carl sent to me. He sent wonderful photos, including one of a deux chevaux car, the Citroën car, which I know a lot of people love. I'll post them this week again on Instagram. Addicted to France is the account you want to follow. Bonjour, Carl, and welcome to Join Us in France.
Bonjour, Annie. Comment ça va?
Ça va bien, merci, et vous?
Bien, merci.
Okay. So today we are talking about a place that you visited many times and that I haven't visited at all, Sancerre, which is in Centre-Loire is the area. So Loire Valley, the Loire River is very close to there. And it's a place you went to many times. And so I think we'll also talk about the joys of returning to the same place over and over again and why that's a good, well, first of all, it's a very French thing to do. Very few visitors ever do that. And also what you get out of it.
Sure, of course.
All right. So tell us about your visits to Sancerre and how it all got started.
Well, we had been traveling to France for many years, regularly. And one year, my wife Christine decided that since we wanted to do an extended stay, we might look to see if we could find what amounted to a home exchange. And as she did her research, she ended up finding, in 2004, she found Sancerre, and the people, Gérard and Marianne Chartrand, owned Coeur de France, the language school there in Sancerre.
Ah, yes.
And it's in a small chateau, beautiful building. And when we saw the photos, we said, "Hey, we need to go there." And of course, Christine said, "Yeah, and I'm going to go to this school." So that's how we found Sancerre.
Excellent. And so you've been going back. Why did you decide to go back again and again and again?
It's an interesting village. It's at the right scale for us. It's small, maybe 1,500 people.
Yeah.
Very few of the people in the village speak much English.
Mm-hmm.
It's not touristy. I mean, and the tourists that you see for the most part, from my observation, are European or Australian or whatever, but not necessarily American tourists. Some American business people because of the wine business in there. But we also, after having met Gérard and Marianne and having them introduce us to others in the village, it became almost like second home for us. And it just, there's a certain comfort level, as you would understand, for us to come back and forth. And so that's what we've been doing. And then the other thing is we've traveled around France, and we're at the stage in our life now where we haven't seen them all, but we've seen a lot of the big sites. And we're more interested in settling into a village culture and relaxing rather than being on the go all the time.
Yeah. And Sancerre is interesting because it's world famous because of its wine. And yet it is quite small, like you mentioned, 1,500 more or less people. And it seems to be losing, because I looked at some of the data on the village, it seems to be losing inhabitants every census. So it's not like a happening place. Is it difficult to get to?
It's easy to get to. You can get there by train from Paris.
Oh, there's a train station?
At Cône-sur-Loire, which is about 6 miles away.
Ah, okay.
Or Nevers, which is south. Some people might go to Bruges, or Bourges, I should say.
Yeah, Bourges, yeah.
What we do is we drive, and it's about a little over 2-hour drive, although we make it a more leisurely drive, southeast of Paris. Mm-hmm. Takes us about 3 hours.
Okay, so you rent a car in Paris?
Rent a car in Paris at the Périphérique on Port Maillot.
Okay.
There's a lot of rent-a-car agencies there, and we don't particularly care to drive in Paris, but getting a car right on the Périphérique, we can just get on that and then take the freeway all the way down.
Right, so you don't actually rent at the airport?
No, we have, but typically we spend a night or two in Paris before we go to Sancerre.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. All right, so you enjoy a leisurely vacation, which is how I am as well. What do you do?
Well, years ago I was in a business meeting with a colleague, and he asked me, what are you going to do in a village of 1,500 people for 3 weeks? And I basically told him, I'm not going to do anything, and then I'm going to rest afterward. But what I meant by that, it's kind of a metaphor for, I just didn't want any set schedule.
Right.
And we settle into the rhythm of the village. Boulangerie opens at 7:15. The Café des Arts up in the village square opens at 8. And so we go up and get coffee. And then on Sundays, we normally arrive Saturday evening, have dinner at the same restaurant Saturday evening, Aubert's, Joseph Melot. And then there are markets. And Cône-sur-Loire has an excellent market on Sunday mornings and on Wednesday mornings. And
can you spell the name of the village?
There's a small market. It's Cosne. Sur-Loire.
Okay, Cône-sur-Loire. Cosne. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, and it's only about 6 miles away. And so they have an excellent market. And so we go there Sunday morning, get our veggies and whatever we need. We enjoy the banter in the market.
Yeah.
And that's always fun. And so we get whatever we might need for Sunday for lunch or dinner, and then do it again later. But typically, one of the fun things, there's a dairy truck, La Femme d'Averly, and this couple has a small dairy. They have this dairy truck, and it's so typically village French.
Yeah.
The yogurt is perhaps the best we've ever had. The butter, we think, is the best, is as good as we've ever had. And so we buy yogurt and butter from them. And she will, if you bring a big container, she'll sell it to you in bulk. Even if you bring a bottle for milk, she will pour bulk milk into your bottle. And what's interesting is there's always a conversation,
of course,
between she and whoever is buying, and there may be a line, and we just patiently wait in line for our turn, because that's just kind of the way it is, and that's okay. We've been there enough. She recognizes us. She knows that we're aliens, but Christine can converse well enough in French. And I can get by, and so we can always get what we want. And same thing is true with the other vendors, although many of the other vendors will switch to English. We prefer to try to do it in French.
Mm-hmm.
And Christine likes to attend the language school, Coeur de France, and they recommend highly that we do immersion. I don't go to the school, but Christine does regularly. And so we try when we're there to immerse as well as we can.
Yeah. Obviously, it's best if you can chat with people, with French people, wherever you go. Sometimes they will try to switch to English because they'd like to practice their English too.
We find that in Paris, but we don't find that so much in Sancerre or in the surrounding villages. Mainly because most of the people don't speak much French. Although I'll admit that at Coeur de France, they do speak to the merchants and boutiques in the village and cafes and restaurants, and ask them when at all possible to
use
get
French.
Once they recognize the students, to get them to speak in French.
Yes. That's good. Yeah, that language school has been mentioned a few times on the podcast, so it must be very good.
It is good, and we enjoy it. Christine has taken group lessons in the past, and now where she is, she's much more comfortable taking private lessons, and so that works well for us.
Great.
And while that may be 2 hours a day, 2 hours one morning, 2 hours one afternoon, the following afternoon or so. And so when she's in school, I will go do my thing, which may be go for a long hike in the vineyards, or meet Gérard up at Café Libéry to have coffee and chat with Olivier. And that's a village experience that really is a cultural experience that we enjoy.
Yeah.
What's interesting about it is when you go in, it's tiny. There's 3 or 4 bar stools. There's 2 or 3 tables. It's a bookstore with a tiny cafe. And Olivier, of course, recognizes me, and we chat. But what I enjoy, the same people come in at the same time every day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like a schedule.
Yeah.
And so they recognize me, and they know that I don't speak much French, and but they speak French to me. And then if I get stuck, either Gérard, if he's there, or Olivier, who speaks a tiny bit of English, will kind of help me get through, and it works well.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you a quick story. Right across from Café Libéry was a little, on Rue de Paix, there was a little pottery store. And when we first started going to Sancerre, we noticed that it was never open. And then we read the sign on it one afternoon, and the sign said something to the effect of, I'm here Tuesdays through Saturdays from 2 to 5, except when I'm not. And it was so typical.
Yeah.
And in other words, he was open when he was there, and he wasn't open when he wasn't.
That's right. Things come up.
And that's how life is.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's how life is.
Yes. Yeah, these people who stay in villages like that typically aren't the most, motivated people in the world. I mean, yeah, sure, they might want to make a little more money, but they got what they need, and it's good enough, right? Like, they're not going to be people who are just go,
Right. Well, we tracked him down. We went and found his shop in a village about 20 or 30-minute drive away, and we ended up buying a bunch of hand-painted tiles that are now the backsplash in our house.
Oh, how nice.
And so he shipped them to us. But another thing we do when we're in Sancerre that I would share with you, we like to drive down to another village called Le Borgne. And Le Borgne is also a pottery village. And we went down there, and there's a restaurant there that we'd go to. And the last time we went, the restaurant was closed, and I think closed permanently, unfortunately. And so we walked into a gallery across the street, big sign, Exposition, and bought a few things. And then we asked the gentleman there if he would ship to us. And of course, the other guy had shipped to us. And he basically said no, it was trop compliqué.
Yeah.
And so, okay, we got that. And so I asked him, I knew there was another restaurant down the street, and I asked him if it might be open. And he put his palms out and gave me the shrug, and he basically said, peut-être oui, peut-être non.
Voilà.
And so I understood what he wasn't going to be responsible for whether or not the restaurant was open, but it was fine.
Yeah.
And by the way, it was not. It was not.
Yeah, you can't be on too tight a schedule in a place like this. You have to just, I'll come back. Whatever.
You go with the flow.
Yeah.
Just go with the flow. And that's how you can enjoy it. If you get uptight about that, it's not going to be fun.
Yeah, and it's good.
It's not the right place.
If you have an interest, like for you like to exercise, you like to take walks in the vineyards, you will fill your days with things that meet your needs rather than going down some list of places that you must run to, and that's a very French thing to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. And the village is picturesque. I mean, it's got a central square that has boutiques, wine caves, cafes. There's even a one-star restaurant there.
Right, I'm sure it's upper scale, because if it has pottery places and art galleries and things, then it has to get enough visitors with deep pockets to do this.
Well, I think the major draw, of course, is the wine business.
Right.
And they've been in the business many, many years. There's a lot of tasting opportunities and sales opportunities. And so the vintners in the area, I think, do pretty well. I don't want to say the wealth of the village, but when you look at the commerce in the village, it seems to be at a different scale than some of the other neighboring areas.
Yeah, because Sancerre can sell for good money. I mean, I buy it occasionally. I never go looking for the expensive bottles, but you pay at least 12 euros for a bottle of Sancerre at the grocery store. And it's between 12 and 20 what I find at the grocery store, which means it's for France, that's expensive.
Yeah, but it's worth every centime.
Yeah, it's good, yeah.
Yeah. But then there are other villages. So we go to Gérard and Marianne introduced us to Christophe Reverdy. They have Jean Reverdy et Fils, which is in Verdeny, which is maybe 15-minute drive out of Sancerre. It's another wine village, and Christophe is nice enough that invites us to come taste at his cellar whenever we're there, and we do. We do a late afternoon tasting with him, And when we can, we have dinner with he and his wife Ranu, and they've come and visited us here. So
Yeah.
it's a wonderful relationship.
So yeah, you're friends.
And for the years that we've been going to Sancerre, we've gone there. We've gone to see Christophe et Jean Riverdier feast every year.
Mm-hmm. And
even I convinced the local wine merchant here to import his wines, and so we can get it here
in Hawaii.
In Hawaii, it's $25 a bottle here.
Well, it's not so bad.
Just a Sauvignon Blanc,
right? Because there are a lot of that's the problem with shipping wine to the U.S. is that there are a lot of people along the way. There are a lot of mandatory taxes and paperwork and things, and so a lot of people are taking a cut along the way, and that's why usually it's only the biggest wine producers that can afford to do this, because they will ship it a container at a time, and maybe this person can't do that.
Yeah, they have I forget what they call it. It's like brokers that they have to deal with in France, who have import license into the United States.
Yeah.
And then that importer then has to deal with somebody who's licensed to distribute in the United States, and then that gets to the retailer. So as you say, many hands touch it. Yeah,
it's a bit complicated.
It is, and they make a very, very nice Sauvignon Blanc. They make a rosé out of Pinot Noir, and I really like their Pinot Noir because it's very light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's.
And so there's also next door to Sancerre is Chavignon, and Chavignon is a nice wine village, good place to taste. And Henri Bourgeois, they're a large producer there in Chavignon. They import a lot to Hawaii, into America, and but we like to go down there and have lunch. There's a nice little restaurant, Au Petit Goûter, that we've gone to for lunch or for dinner.
That's a cute name.
And it is.
It means the little snack, the little mid-afternoon snack.
Okay, and they also have, of course, the crottin de chèvre. Crottin de Chavignon.
Yes, of course.
Which you must have, of course.
Yes. Yeah, that sounds good. So are there big...
very enjoyable.
Are there any touristy attractions around there that you've been to that you recommend?
There are ways to drive to various chateaux.
Yeah.
One of the things that I very much enjoy, and we took our granddaughter to, we also took her to Le Borgne when she was 10 to a potter, and that the pottery village at Le Borgne is interesting. But there is, and you may be familiar with it, Guy Delon, which is a medieval village that they're constructing in Burgundy.
Yes, of course. Guy Delon, yes. I've heard about it. I haven't been, but I've heard about it. Oh, so what is that like?
It's a fascinating place to visit. In essence, as I understand the history, and it's about 25 years now, people got together, created a foundation. They decided to try to recreate a medieval village with a castle using medieval methods.
Yep.
And so they bought, I think, 200 hectares.
Yep.
Over in Burgundy, had with a stream through it, clay soils, forest, and stone. And that way they could create a quarry, they could harvest timber, they could raise crops, they had the stream to grind grain with, and of course water for the village. And so it's they've been recreating this thing that people who work there are wearing period costume.
Yep.
The work is by hand. The cart that they pull a stone with is a horse-drawn cart. The crane is kind of like a big hamster wheel with a derrick on it. Yep. So they unload the cut stone onto a pallet, and a guy will get get into this hamster wheel and just kind of walk and raise it up. And so they've been building this castle and village, and I enjoy going and watching the change. Or maybe every other year. It's not moving lightning speed, but it's moving slowly. But there's a lot that's been done.
Yeah. So this is something that they do all over France, but this one is a big one. It's typically people who have, very often they have PhDs in medieval this or that, or archaeology or things like that. And these are people who have spent a lot of time studying these old places, and they've realized that you can make assumptions about how things were made in the past, but you really should try it. And that's what they're doing, is they're just attempting to make a medieval village with what they knew medieval people had and nothing else. And it's fascinating.
Right. Right.
It's like a science experiment with archaeology or something like that, I guess.
Yeah. Simply put, their ruler is a 13-knot string or rope.
Right.
And of all different lengths. And that's how they measure their blocks or their bricks or their tiles or whatever.
Yeah, and with those ropes, you can actually make really good square, good angles. And when I was in elementary school, they taught us how to use this. It was the geometry lesson.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
You can do all sorts of math with that thing.
Absolutely. But I don't know about tourist attractions per se, but La Charité sur Loire, which is maybe 15 miles away south of Sancerre on the Loire. It's a bookseller's village. There are a lot of chateaux in the area, and Sancerre is on the eastern part of the Loire, so about a 2-hour drive from the big chateau, but there are smaller ones that we've gone to. And Nevers is kind of a nice city. Mm-hmm. And Bourges nice. is a beautiful city with a magnificent cathedral.
Yep.
It's got a great cathedral. There's shopping there if that's your thing. And so we will tend to drive down to Bourges every trip and go shopping. And I always go into the cathedral. Mm-hmm. It's just one of those magnificent things that France has. Yeah. And I always love to look at the architecture and try to figure out how they did it.
Right. It's a mystery to me also. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Bourges also has a wonderful women's basketball team. But
okay. I understand that. I've heard you talk about women's basketball in the past.
Yeah, they're very good. And I have a dear friend who lives up there, and we were in high school together, and she comes to visit whenever she comes to visit her parents who still live down in the south. She comes to visit, and every time she says, "Come visit me." I will someday. I will, because it's kind of far away from the south of France.
Right.
A few hours drive.
It's a ways.
It's
a ways. Yeah.
But there's all sorts of good reasons to go.
Absolutely. Other things to do, of course, visit a goat dairy. Tourists like to do that, and that is fun. Mm-hmm. The goat dairies, there's a number of them. They're easy to find, and we've enjoyed taking our grandchildren to do that.
Yeah.
And there's a race called a Trial de Sancerre, which is they have two different distances, 15K and 25K. 5 years ago, I ran the 15K race. And people come from all over to do that.
Oh, yeah.
And the trial series is all over France. You could run a trial to something every weekend, I think. There's one in Bourges.
Yeah. And those are hard.
But
They're in the mud and everything.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Well, in Sancerre, you start up in a village and then you run down into the valley and through the vineyards and then up through forests and over hills and then back down in the valleys and end up back in a village. So it's not for the faint of heart. It was harder than I thought it would be, but I loved it. I really enjoyed it.
My sister does that sort of crazy thing too. She loves it too.
It's not crazy. It's something for sanity.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a very good point. How very nice. Okay, so the food we talked about, the crottin, so the goat cheese. Obviously, the wine. Is there other food specialties around there?
Well, they do have. You see a Sancerre type of ham that they have. They also have various types of whitefish out of the river that you'll see. And I noticed that the restaurants and in the markets, there will be various types of pâté.
Ah, yes.
And I like to try. It's always a mystery. And if I like it, fine, we'll buy more. And if we don't, we'll try something else.
Yeah.
But typically, I think the area, it's more the cheese and wine and perhaps the ham as food specialties. I may be missing something, but
what's the longest?
But a big draw again, and
Sorry.
Well, I was going to say a big draw, of course, in Sancerre, whether you're a tourist or not, is the language school, the Coeur de France.
Yeah.
That has changed commerce a little bit in the village, because they do get quite a few students come through there, and I think that's helped the village. You mentioned losing population, and I think that's helped the village maintain population.
Right. Well, they probably have the problem with villages like that lose population over time is that typically it just means that the young people have to move to Paris or Bourges or Nevers or something to find a job. And that's never a good sign.
Right.
Because it means the people who stay in the village are getting older and older and,
Absolutely. It's unfortunate, but that happens.
Yeah.
But opportunities other than the wine business generally are out of town, I think.
Yeah. So when is it the kind of place where you can go to a winery without an appointment, or do you have to book a time to go visit a winery? Or do a tasting?
They have both.
Okay.
And I can't name the wineries. I think Henri Bourgeois in Chavignol. I think their tasting room is open and you could pretty much go anytime. I think most of the others might be appointment, but I really don't know. We fortunately have always been hosted. Gérard will take us, or Christophe will call us, and we've done it that way. So I'm not as familiar as someone else might be.
Right. So what's the longest you've ever stayed?
1 month.
Okay. And you do that every year?
We've stayed a month. I would like to stay a minimum of 1 week, or generally at least 2, and prefer 3. Lately, we've only been staying 1 week, and because one of the other things we've been doing, we enjoy village-to-village trekking in Europe. And we started on the Camino Santiago a few years ago and went from Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port up and over the Pyrenees and down through Roncevaux, Pamplona, and ended up in Logroño. And then we also did a variant, the Portuguese way, from Portugal to Santiago. And last year, and Gérard and Marianne would be proud of us, because we did the section on the way of Le Puy-en-Velay. And we started in Aire-sur-Adour and ended up in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. And we got there by going through Bayonne. And when we left Bayonne for the 10 days that we were trekking, from the time we left Bayonne to the time we arrived in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, we did not hear an American voice.
Wow.
We heard some English, and for the most part, the little hotels or guest houses that we stayed in, the operators did not speak English, or if they did, it was very little, and the guests, for the most part, were French. And so we were immersed.
Yeah.
For 10 days, and it was wonderful. We didn't have any issues.
Yeah. So were you carrying your own backpack, or did you have
combination? We carried day packs, and we actually retained a service to move our bag. Mm-hmm. We each had a light bag that they moved to us for us from location to location. But we carried our water with snacks and change of clothes and that sort of thing.
Sure. Did you use a book for that?
We used a service, and they organized everything for us. But what we found also was the Miam Miam Dodo series books, and we unfortunately didn't have it. But we met some people at dinner in a guest house one evening, and they had it. Yeah.
Miam Miam Dodo is like the Bible.
Yeah, we ran into them the next day, and we were having a difficult time finding our accommodation. And so I just took a photo. He found it in his book. I took a photo of it, and then we were able to find our accommodation. And so when we got back to Bayonne, I bought the series, and so I have this series that would take us from Le Puy-en-Velay to all the way to Santiago.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in French. I think it's an app as well.
Okay, we'll have to look that up.
Yeah, I think you can get it as an app. But anyway, yeah, well, by the time your episode airs, I will have aired another one about the Santiago. And she mentioned the Miam Miam Dodo book, which I remember because it's a funny name.
It's a strange name, but after acquiring it, it's so much better than anything else I've had. And I've purchased a lot of Camino de Santiago books, but this one was the most detailed.
Yeah, that's really good. So you end up coming to France quite a bit.
We do. We love it. We love the language. We love the culture. And as you'd imagine, 12-hour time zone from Hawaii, it's a long ways. And we used to take 2 red-eye flights to get there. And lately we've been taking a little more leisurely way. We will go ahead and fly from Hawaii from Kona. There's very good air service where we are, to San Francisco and spend the night, and then fly to New York and spend several nights there, and then catch an early morning flight to London, spend a night at the airport. And that way we avoid the red eyes, and then Eurostar to Paris. And by doing that, by the time we get there, we're slowly catching up to the difference in time zone.
That's true.
And so we don't get beat up as much.
Yeah.
But that way we can enjoy our stay in France or anywhere else in Europe much better.
So the last thing I'd like to know is, when you go to Sancerre, do you always stay in the same apartment or villa or whatever?
No, we don't. There are multiple places to stay, and Coeur de France has accommodations in a Thomasserie building where the school is, and they also have accommodations that they own scattered around the village that we can rent. Mm-hmm. And there are other accommodations available through Airbnb or VRBO or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And we have stayed. There are some hotels in town. We have stayed in a Panoramique, which is a nice hotel, for a few nights when we needed to. Or down at the base of Sancerre, there's a village, Sancerre, And they have Le Laurier, which is a kind of a nice hotel with a very nice little restaurant. We've stayed down there.
Good to know. Okay, so everybody listening, if you're interested in more details, Carl has sent me his notes where he lists a lot of the things we've talked about. And so from the episode page, you'll be able to get to the guest notes, which will have all the details that he's written out. And I'll also write a summary of our discussion. And something that I don't mention enough, but very often after I publish an episode, somebody will send me an email and say, oh, you could have talked about this or you could have talked about that. And obviously, I can't go back and edit the conversation. But what I do is I add it to the show notes for that for that topic. And so if you're going to take a trip to Sancerre or visit that area, take a look at the website and search for Sancerre because it's always got a lot of good info there.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you so much, Carl. You've been really fun to talk to, and when's your next trip to France? As far as you know, well, yeah, it's hard to know these days, isn't it?
Well, it's hard to know. We're booked on September 3rd, but we just canceled that because they won't allow travel from U.S. So assuming they allow travel and we're comfortable with traveling, we'll probably come in May.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hopefully by then it'll be resolved.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. But right now we're temporarily planning to be in May, and who knows, maybe it'll be May and September both. We like to come in September because the weather is so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to decide if you should come in June or in September because both months have a potential for really nice weatve.
Absolutely.
May as well, but May could be rainy. Some years May is rainy. You never know.
May, we've found it to be wet.
Yeah.
In Sancerre, it can be wet in May.
Yeah.
But it's also cool. And it's beautiful. I mean, springtime is beautiful.
Yeah, I was reading that they get rain even in the middle of the summer. Whereas in the south where I am, it's quite unusual to have rain in July or the first half of August. It can happen, but most years it doesn't.
Yeah, no, I don't think I've been there in a lot of months, and every time I've been there, we've had some rain.
Yeah,
which is a good thing. I mean, that's the wineries need that.
Yep, they're certainly not watering them. Because that's not allowed.
No, they're not watering. That's not allowed, so they're not doing it.
Yeah, they're not doing it.
It's very strict.
Yep. Well, yeah, you have to control your product, or it's not worth doing.
Oh yeah, I know in Sancerre I don't know what the organization is called, but they determine the day you can harvest. You can't harvest before that particular day. They give you the date that you can harvest. Yep. And if you're going to put Sancerre on your label.
Yeah, right. And
I mean, they're very strict.
And why wouldn't you? I mean, if you have the chance, if you're lucky enough to be there, because that's a prestigious label. So, yeah, you'd want to have it, for sure.
Right. You got to follow the rules.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much, Carl. And,
thank you.
Good luck with your next trip to France.
Thank you. It's been fun talking to you as compared to just listening to your podcast, which I've been doing almost from day one.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think I started on maybe number 25.
Wow. Oh, and that's another thing I should mention.
It's been a while.
Yeah. If by the time this episode is out, we will be over number 300. And that means that the first few episodes will not be available through your app anymore, your podcast app. If you want to listen to the earlier ones, you have to go to the website because Apple is the big directory for podcasting, and they have a rule that they only list 300, and that's it. After that, you drop off. The earlier ones drop off, which is, I mean, that doesn't mean they're not available anymore. It just means you can't have them on your app.
It's understandable.
Yeah.
And when do you suppose this podcast would air?
Probably September, possibly early October, because I've recorded a bunch of them. So I've been busy.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah,
You've been busy.
Yep.
You've been busy.
Merci beaucoup, Carl.
Merci beaucoup.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Again, I want to thank my patrons for supporting the show and giving back. Patrons get several exclusive rewards for doing so. You can see them at patreon.com/join us. Patreon, join us. Thank you to all of you for supporting the show. Some of you for many years now. You are fantastic. And a shout out this week to new patrons, Joseph Wright and Michael Spicer. Thank you so much for becoming patrons and making this podcast possible. Another way to support this podcast is to hire me to be your itinerary consultant. It'll cost you $50, but you get a custom itinerary that will fit your needs and save you a lot of time. Plus, you'll get the input of a local. Email Annie at joinusinfrance.com to set that up and write itinerary review in the subject line. And if you'd like to support the show without spending a penny you wouldn't have otherwise, remember the Amazon link at the bottom of any page on joinusinfrance.com. So for my personal update this week, I'm still going full steam ahead with the cookbook. This week, my volunteers, my wonderful volunteer recipe testers, are working on salade niçoise, gâteau au yaourt, clafoutis, bœuf bourguignon, and pot-au-feu. And I'll send 5 more this week. The reports I've been getting back are all really positive. Nobody has reported not liking the recipe, which surprises me a little bit. Sometimes they ask for clarification on something specific, but, that's what makes the book better. I have 19 recipes written and tested so far. I will send 5 more out this week and 5 more the week after that. So I'll get to, I'm hoping to get to 30 of my favorite French recipes for the book. And of course, I'm not writing a comprehensive book of all French recipes. Nobody can do that. But those are just the ones that I tend to make most often and that I think are fairly easy to do at home without spending too much money or too much time. And I want to insist on the fact that my philosophy for this book is, I want to inspire you to cook at home. I have noticed that, especially on podcasts, there are a lot of ads for all these services where they send you little packets of things that are pre-cut and pre-made, and all you have to do is assemble. And I guess that's fine, but it's not that hard to do it yourself, and it's a lot more, it's a lot more satisfying. I don't know. I guess I'm very French that way. I enjoy cooking at home. And I think a lot of us are cooking at home more than we used to, and we have time to do that because, if you're not commuting, you have more time to cook at home. But my philosophy is I want to make it easy enough that people will want to cook at home. Some of the recipes that I'm writing, so I'm going back to the history of the recipe, and I'm going back to what old cookbooks used to, present the way to make these things. And some of these things, like blanquette de veau, which I tested on Elise just yesterday. She was here to record an episode, and so the last few weeks she's been coming. I just cook her something to try for the cookbook. And blanquette de veau, you can make it fairly easily, or you can really go all out and just, oh my goodness, some of these recipes are so complicated. I don't get the point. Like, okay, it might make 5% difference, but you'll spend your whole day cooking this. So my idea is, make it taste right, make it French, but not be a slave to your kitchen kind of thing, because I know most of us don't have that kind of time. So that's what I've been doing. And my goal is still to release the book the first half of November. And I guess I'm going to have to think of what to call it besides the cookbook. So if you have any suggestions, I would love to hear it. Email me, Annie at joinusinfrance.com. And honestly, I don't have that much else to report because I've been cooking nonstop. My husband is wonderful. He takes care of all the dishes. Thank you so much. That's really, really good. And we've been eating very well indeed. Sometimes I make a little too much, and so I have leftovers. And so we take some of the leftovers to our daughter, she's a college student in Toulouse. It's very strange with this COVID thing. So we drive up. There's nowhere to park usually on her tiny one-way street in the city center. So we stop and talk through the window. She's on the ground floor until someone comes up and we need to move. Usually we can talk for 10 minutes or something, so it's not a big deal. There's been a few cases of COVID-19 at her school. Of course, she wears a mask at school and she's very careful all the time, but she doesn't want to take chances. And so we have to keep our distances, which I really, really hate. Tell you the truth, I really hate it, but so it is. The numbers are going up in France. The last few days, it's been around 16,000 new cases every day. It's particularly bad around Marseille and Aix right now. And France is doing very poorly right now. I'm pretty sure we have the worst numbers of all of Europe as I record this. And it's really disheartening. There are businesses that are going to get closed, like restaurants, cafes, bars, gyms. Those are all places where it's hard to wear a mask. Well, or impossible. I'm in a restaurant, you're eating, So yeah, I'm staying home a lot. And as I put together this episode, I get all these messages from people. I don't usually read messages from listeners and fans on the show, but I get several a week. And several people this week said, it's so nice that the podcast keeps going, and it feels it's a nice thing to think about something besides the everyday things, which are pretty dire. I mean, the news, most of the people who listen to me are in North America, and wow, it's like I don't know what's happening over there. Everything wrong is happening all at once. It's terrible. And, I'm French, born and raised, and I live in France, but I am an American by choice, and I love America. And it just makes me so sad to see this stuff. Now, I have to try and keep away from some of it, keep away from the news, because it just stresses me out. Like, I can't listen to more than just a few minutes a day. So, in my opinion, there's some stresses you can't avoid. Like maybe you have health issues, maybe you have family issues, maybe you have work issues. Those are stresses that, you can't avoid them. You got to deal with them. But the stresses having to do with watching the news, well, that I can turn off. And so I do, So I feel for you. I'm so looking forward to better days, and I'm sure they will come, but whoa, that's really been very hard. Fall has arrived in France. As I look outside the window, it's about to start raining soon. There's been a ton of rain in Paris last week, like heavy rain. And so it's a little strange because I think one of the things with climate change is that weather is getting more intense, instead of these, it's raining in Paris. Yeah, now it's never just raining in Paris. When it's coming down so hard that it causes floods. It's not quite that bad in Paris, but it was that bad around Montpellier. So the fall is definitely here. The weather is cooling off, and people are going to start spending more time inside, and hopefully they'll be wearing masks, because that seems to work. If you enjoy the show, introduce a friend to the podcast and show them how to listen. We're now on Amazon Music. I'm told I have applied to be on Amazon Music, but I can't check it because they haven't made it available in France yet. So if you're in the US and you use Amazon Music, would you please check to see if you can find Join Us in France on your app, and let me know. Next week, I will bring you a podcast episode about, this one is going to be very interesting. It's about French kings and the Catholic Church and their strange relationship with the Catholic Church. So it's going to be a heavily historical episode. There you go. So send questions or feedback to Annie@joinusinfrance.com. Thank you so much for listening. Stay well. And I hope you join me next time so we can, look around France together and have a bit of fresh air thinking about all the good things to come in our lives. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2020 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.